This is an oral history interview with Joe Bennett Sr. in his home on April 13, 1983. The interviewer is Susan Gortner. Mr. Bennett, what was your father's name and where was he born?
His name is James Harvey Bennett, and he was born in Pharmacy City, Illinois.
And your mother?
My mother was born here in Piatt County in Monticello, Illinois.
And what was her name?
Her name was Carrie. Carrie Valentine.
Okay. What type of work did your father do?
My father and they started farming in their early years when they was first married, and then they moved to the state of Washington, and he was in the lumber business and the timber business out there for about 7 years, and then returned to Illinois and went back to farming, and that's what he did the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm. Was the farm in Farmer City, the area?
Yes, in the Farmer City area, yes.
So you grew up on the farm?
Well, I grew up on the farm here in Piatt County. We moved from north of Mansfield, where I was born, between Mansfield and Farmer City. We moved in here in 1918, in March 1918. And I grew up on the Allerton farms as a boy and went to country school out there as a boy, and then the high school in Monticello. I left the farm in 1930 and I went to work for the Shell Oil Company. And in 1932, I went to work for the old Deep Rock Oil Company, which now is Kerr McGee. And in 1952, I went into business for myself as an independent jobber.
Mm-hmm. To go back to your childhood, which Allerton farm did you live on?
Well, when we moved in here in 1918, we moved on what they call the Johnny Eyre farm, which was adjacent to the Allerton farms. And the foreman of the Allerton farms seen that there were three of us boys and my father, that we wasn't farming enough land, so they rented some land adjacent to us, which was Allerton land, in 1923. And in 1925, then, the father moved us on to one of the Allerton farms, which is south of the old Hainline School.
Mm-hmm. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters.
Where were you? Were you youngest?
I'm the youngest.
I'm the youngest. What type of chores were you responsible for?
Well, of course, we was on a big farm. We at that time it was a big farm. They talk about big farms now, but in those days we was responsible for 1,000 acres, and we had a full program of livestock. Father had a dairy herd. He took care of the dairy herd, and I was a cattle man. One of my other brothers was the hog man. The other one took care of the sheep. So we had a full program of livestock, plus all the other things we had to take care of, such as the horses and mules that was used a lot in those days.
And how far did you have to go to school?
Well, I was lucky in the country school. We only had about a mile, and of course I had to come to Monticello then to high school, which it was down Allerton Payment was about 2.5 miles.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember what type of lunches you used to take when you went?
Well, back in those days, of course, Mother would fix whatever was available. She was a good cook, but usually you took your boiled eggs and your peanut butter sandwiches and whatever other sandwiches she could make. And if she had other meats and so forth, well, she would use those to supplement. And always had an apple or something like that. We raised apples. We had fruit. We didn't want for anything to eat.
Who was your teacher? Do you recall when you were at the Hainline School?
Well, we had the main teacher we had, who has now passed away, was Faye Meyer. She was my main teacher from the 5th grade on up through the 8th grade. Her name was Faye Meyer.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you go to another school besides the Hainline?
I started in my 1st grade of school at north of Mansfield, and I can't recall the name of the school anymore. I started there in September, and we moved down here in March.
Mm-hmm. Did your mother do any work outside the home?
No.
Did she have somebody to help her?
Well, my oldest sister stayed at home quite a while. She didn't marry till quite late, and she stayed at home and helped raise the family and did a lot of the housework, because we had hired men and so forth, so it made a lot of housework to do.
About how many hired men would you have?
Well, it varied. In the summertime, it varied because Father, he hired what we call day help. They would come from town and work all day and return to their homes in Monticello. We always, of course, fed them noon meals. And then in haying time, when we was working in the hay, we worked conjunction with the Allerton farms and their help, and thrashing time the same way. Sometimes we would have as high as 125 people in for dinners during the hay time and the thrashing time.
I can't imagine cooking for all those.
That was a big job. The women cooked for days to take care of that.
Did you have anybody live with your family besides your brothers and sisters?
Well, we had two people, or two men that always come to work for Father. They stayed at the house from March till after the corn was harvested every year. One was from Southern Illinois, the other from Arkansas, and they worked for my father for years. In fact, they was working for him when World War I broke out, and we brought them down here and put them on a train to go to one went to the Army and one to the Navy. And they both returned after the war and went back to work for Father.
How did World War I affect your life?
Well, it affected my life that I never forgot it, because I remember the day we brought them down to put them on the train at the old Wabash station down here. There was two lines of men, the full length of that platform, from the end of the platform down to the gates. And the train pulled in to take them out. And I forget how many there were, but I would say there was 80 to 100 men that went out that day. And, of course, it impressed me as a young fellow. I never forgot it. But both of those people that Dad had went to war and both returned. Mother had quite a time getting them fed up to where they could go back to work, because both of them was in pretty bad shape physically when they come home.
What are your impressions? You were still fairly young when we had Prohibition. Do you remember anything about it?
Yes, I do, very much. It was a failure. That was proven by history. But yes, I used to see a lot of the different things that went on during Prohibition time.
Can you tell us about some of them?
Well, of course, there was an awful lot of dissension among the law enforcement people, between them and the people who were, you might say, was doing the bootlegging of the liquors and so forth at that time. But they used to be quite prevalent. I mean, they didn't hide their activities too well, because they come into this town, I know, when I was working at the old Deep Rock station, and they was quite prevalent. You could see them most any time coming in delivering their products.
Were there any stills in the area, do you think?
Yes, they raided a few. The Sheriff's Department raided a few in this area, but not too many. Most of it was imported into here.
After you finished high school, what did you do?
We got married. The wife and I did when we was young. We got married in 1931. I finished school in 1930, and we was married in 1931. And at that time, I went to work for the Shell Oil Company. I went to work for Shell Oil Company.
How did you meet your wife?
At high school.
So you knew each other for several years?
Well, not really, not too long, but that's where I met her, at high school.
Do you recall your first date?
Yes, I do.
What was it?
Well, if I recall, it's been so long, but if I recall, I think we went to a ball game the first date we had. I had an old '28 Model A, and I think the first time we went out, we went to a ball game together.
Where did you live after you were married?
We lived in an apartment here in Monticello on Charter Street. That was our first place we lived. And after that, we rented some houses. We was on High Street for two different places on High Street for quite a number of years. And as our family, we started having a family, I decided it was no place for a family. So this place was available here that we now live in, and this acreage in this house that we bought was in quite disrepair, but I decided I was going to bring my family to the country. So we bought this in 1940, and we went to work on it to make it livable, to move into it, which we did in September of 1940. And from then on, we started repairing it and fixing it and building onto it to suit ourselves.
Can you tell us a little bit of the history of this house?
Well, this was an old cheese factory. The main part of the house, but the part we're now sitting in at one time, was a cheese factory. It was owned by the Lodge Estate, and they also at one time, this part we're sitting in here now, they stored apples in it in the summertime, or in the fall rather, so they could have them through the winters in the summertime. But it originally was built for a cheese factory. The walls of this house are 18 inches thick brick, and it has a lot of concrete in it, and it's a good old steady house. It'll be here for a long time.
Do you know when it was actually used as a cheese factory?
It was used, I understand, looking back to some of the people that I used to talk to that knew something about it, it was used after it was built in the late 1800s on up into the 1920s, and in the early 30s, I think, then they quit using it for a cheese factory.
Now, you were working with the Shell Oil Company?
It was my first job, was the Shell Oil Company.
What did you do for that?
I worked in a service station for them.
Where was that?
In Monticello.
Where? Can you tell us where
It was on Market Street, now where the First State Bank drive-in is.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it was at.
And after that, then?
I went to the Deep Rock Station, which now is Kerr McGee,
Mm-hmm.
in 1932. And in 1934, I bought my first truck and went into the bulk business for the company, which we delivered products to the countries and to the cities and so forth. One time I had a 3.5 county area that I covered.
During this period, was it very difficult to raise a family during the Depression? How did that affect you?
Well, of course, yes, it was. But then, of course, in those days, money bought, if you had any money at all, it bought more, of course, than it does now. But I went to work for the old Deep Rock Company, to give you an example, in 1932 for $12 a week. And at that time, there was 100 applications for that job, and I got it because I'd had experience. And in 1934, as I say, I bought my first truck and started delivering bulk products for the company under contract, which wasn't easy to do in those days because money still was pretty scarce, because that was a time, that the banks had been closed and money was still pretty scarce to get a hold of. But I was fortunate enough to have some friends to help me and got started.
Did you have any money in the banks when the banks closed?
No, we didn't. My company did it I worked for.
Mm-hmm.
And everything was done then in cash.
Mm-hmm. Where would you go to pick up your supplies that you were delivering?
Well, most of them was delivered at that time by the railroad, and in the later years in my bulk business career, they started bringing it in with tankers by truck, and at that time the tank farm that we had that would supply us mostly was down here at Forsyth. We did haul some stuff out of Robinson from the Marathon refinery, and there was times at night that I would haul by transport when the driver that they had too many hours, and then deliver in the daytime in the smaller trucks to the country. There was times that up here when we built old 47 between here and Cisco, which is 1938, there was times in there that I would get out of bed at midnight on Sunday night and never go to bed till the next Saturday night. All the sleep I got, I caught in the truck. I was supplying that job in all the rest of my customers too in the territory I had. It was a job that had to be serviced 24 hours a day, so it kept me pretty busy.
What kind of roads did you have?
Well, the country roads in those days, of course, some of them were practically impassable unless they was froze up, especially in the north part of this county and the north part of DeWitt County. In those areas, they had gravel roads and no money to maintain them, and the only way you could get over them in the wintertime was whether it froze up. And sometimes that was difficult because the people then were heating with fuel oil. You had to get to them some way, and if you had a big snows, you had a problem. And sometimes they'd meet you with caterpillars to pull you through the bad spots, or meet you with a high bed truck and take some of their fuels home with them in barrels to survive till you could get to them with a big truck. So it was very difficult in those days on transportation.
Can you give us an idea of how the prices have changed for home fuel oil?
Well, I can give an example of that. I hauled hundreds of thousands of gallons of fuel oil and delivered it for as low as 3.5 cents. And I remember when it went to 6.5 cents, I heard an awful lot of hollering. And I've hauled gasoline and delivered to the country for 13.5 cents tax paid. Of course, there wasn't much tax on it in those days. They started putting tax on it in the early 30s. But fuels then was really cheap. I mean, there was quite a supply of them, and they really was cheap in those days.
After you had your truck for delivering the bulk oil, what did you go into?
Well, I sold out and went to the Air Force in World War II. And when I returned from World War II, I bought back in. the bulk business. And I'd always had an idea I wanted to have a business of my own because I had made a lot of friends in the industry, and we had this land here, this 26 acres that we bought in 1940, and on the south end of it, the first thing I built was that big station and garage, and took in a partner to make it go. And the second thing we built was a drive-in. It was a Dairy Queen drive-in that we had down there at that time. From then on, we went to the bowling alley was built, and the skating rink was built, and then I broke the rest of it down into housing. But I decided that I needed to get in the business for myself, so I started in to put it together, and we did put it together, and it was very successful. I was known as what you call an independent jobber, and I sold stuff wholesale and retail.
How many gas stations were there then?
I just, in the town you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they was down to our own, which was known as the Chelnut Oil Company, which is an independent, and
who was your partner?
Chelsea Marks was my partner. He run the garage part. I handled all the petroleum end of it. There was us, and of course at that time the old Texaco station, and the Standard Oil station, and the old Deep Rock station, and a DX station. Some of those went out of business. There was also a Phillips station went out of business. We ended up, very few of us left before I sold out after I retired. There wasn't very many of us left anymore.
You said you were in World War II.
Yes.
Where did you serve?
I served in the 477th Bombardment in the B-29s.
And where were you stationed?
Our first station was Guam, and from Guam to the Marianas.
Can you tell us some of your memories of World War II?
Well, it was the short time I was in. I wasn't in too long. I got in kind of late. I enlisted because I had 3 children, and I debated quite a while about enlisting, but it got to the place to where they was talking about maybe drafting me, so I decided to enlist to get what I wanted. And I'll say this much about it. It was a great experience. I wouldn't want to repeat it, but it was a great experience.
How long were you in the service?
I was in 26 months.
What are some of your childhood memories of Monticello when you moved here?
Well, of course, it's changed a lot over the period of years. Of course, when we first come here, we didn't come to town, of course, very much. You come to town when it was necessary, and then maybe on Saturday nights you got to come to town. But when we come to town, the old livery stable was still there, where the old Deep Rock station is now, the old Kerr McGee station is now. Where the post office is was a hitching lot. There were several blacksmith shops in town, which now is gone. The square is about the same in buildings. There's, of course, been a lot of changes in the buildings around the square, and a lot of changes, of course, in types of business around the square since I was a young one. But I would say the biggest change has been in the type of businesses that are done in our community. When we first come here, of course, there was the core of the business, of course, was agriculture. I mean, there was elevators, 2 elevators, 3 elevators, and 1 implement store at that time. Finally, there was 2, and of course, there was clothing stores and 2 drug stores and a lot of different types of stores because people didn't go out of town at that time to shop. But then over the period of years, that changed, especially when transportation got better. And there's been a lot of changes in town. Some of the houses in town hasn't changed too much, only to improve them. Of course, the estates that we had, at that time, the Moore estates, of course, was quite a thing for people to come and see. The Allen F. Moore place and the Brad Moore place, and of course some of the other big homes that was around here at that time.
Well, after you had your station here, how long did you continue to?
We built it in 52 and opened in 52, and I sold out in 76.
I know that you've had lots of experience in politics and other county jobs. Can you tell us about some of those?
Well, I've been around those types of things now on my 23rd year. Of course, I started out, my first experience in public life was when I returned from World War II, was in American Legion work. I was chosen and elected as post commander in 1948, and that kind of started my career. And then in 1950, I was appointed to the Township Board of Trustees, and I was on that for 12 years. And I've now served a 10-year period on the county board and been reelected for another 2-year term. It's been a great experience because I've met a lot of fine people in my time, not only locally but in the state and also federal people, the congressmen that we've had, Congressman Springer, and of course now Congressman Madigan, who used to be our House representative in Springfield, is a good friend of myself and my family. And the reason why I worked with some of them closely, my career in selective service, which I spent 25 years at, I had to work closely with my congressman in cases that we had during that time. And so I've had a good relationship with not only local officials but state and federal officials too. It's been a great experience. I've been able to do some things for my community and the county and also from the state and from the federal level too. I think the greatest experience I've had, though, again, is my time that I spent in selective service. That was a presidential appointment, and I was very proud of it. And I served 20 years on the board, which is all they let us serve under the law. And I was appointed to a committee to put the selective service system to bed. There was 5 of us that worked in the state of Illinois to help put the system to bed on standby. So my public life, along with my career here as a businessman, and has been very fruitful. I think it's been a great experience. I would suggest that any young person today that is interested in doing something for his community should get into not only to politics but into everything else that he can do for his community.
When did you go on the Selective Service Board?
I was trying to think what day it was. I've got it here somewhere. Mr. Stoddard, who was a board member at the time, recommended me for that appointment, and it was just before the Korean conflict that I went on. I'd have to look up to tell you exactly the date.
But that gives us a rough idea.
But I served through the Korean conflict and the Vietnam conflict, and I chaired the board for 10 years. And the person, I guess, that got me most interested in it, the great friend of mine who's now gone, was Dean Barry. Dean was not only active in the Legion when I come home, that's the first thing he handed me when I went through the office to turn in my discharge was an application to the American Legion. And he turned out to be a great friend of mine, and he was secretary for the system during World War II. And when the opening come out that Mr. Stoddard was going to leave, he recommended me to take his place, and that's how I got into the system.
What was the public atmosphere like? Did it change considerably during the Korean conflict over Vietnam?
Well, we had very little trouble. I was real fortunate, I guess, in my career in selective service. I had some of the finest board members, I guess, that anybody ever had to help them on a board. There was people from different parts of the county. All of them were veterans, and we did our work. We treated everybody the same. We had a good relationship with the state board. We had a good relationship with the federal board, and we had very little trouble in Piatt County, because I think the reason why we didn't have any trouble is because we treated them all alike. We did everything according to law. We gave everybody their rights under the law, and I think we had very good results with our board, because we didn't play any favorites with anybody. We treated them all alike. But I did meet a lot of fine officers in the system. There was officers from all branches of service that was over us, and I made a lot of personal friends among those people. And one of the people I'll never forget, who was the director of selective service from the federal level, was General Hershey. one of the finest Americans I ever had the privilege of ever meeting and knowing. And I had some high-ranking officers in Springfield that still today we still talk to one another whenever chance we get. Most of them now have retired, and the colonel directly over me is now retired and is living down at Cherokee Village in Arkansas. But I met some fine people, and as I say, I had a fine board, and we got along very well. Sure, there was some changes in the attitude, I think, of some of our people between Korea and Vietnam, but overall, this county had very little trouble with our restaurants. I had some fine secretaries to run our offices, and I have no regrets with the system. Some people said they wouldn't serve on that board, but I thought it was a privilege to serve on it. And somebody had to do it, and it was very essential we do it. I think now there'd be problems if we was back into it, but I think the attitude's changed a lot since then.
Do you look for the selective service boards to come back?
I don't think it ever been abolished. What we tried to do was to get the Congress to pass a law to have mandatory training for all young men out of high school for 2 years and put them on reserve, so we wouldn't have this problem we have now trying to get boys to register and to serve in the military service. We never could get it done, but we sure did try all the time I was in there to get the Congress to take a look at that bill and to give us a reserve system that could be used if we had an emergency. Of course, myself and my son both are veterans. My son served in Korea, and of course I may be a little partial, but I think the military service is something that everybody should have some experience in. I think it does a lot for you.
When did you decide to run for the county board?
Well, when they changed the 1972, the new constitution, it used to be, that the county board and the township supervisor were one of the same. In 1972, when they changed the constitution, they separated them, which is no longer does the township government have anything to do with county government, and now we're known as a county board. And at that time, they was known as county supervisors. And when that happened, and the time come that I had to make a choice either to stay on the township board or go on to county board, I decided I was going to run for the county board, which I did, and I was successful being elected. That was 1972, and I've made a lot of friends in that form of government. I've been fortunate to be appointed to some committees, not only from the county level but from the state level, that has put me in a position to do a lot of good for my county. And I think it's great myself. It takes a lot of time, and I realize now since I'm retired, I have the time, more time to put in than I used to have. But I used to take time away from my business to do it, which I don't have to do anymore. And of course, in all of my career, I've taken a lot of time away from my family, which some people wouldn't do. But again, I think that's the responsibility of people who are in our community to give up some of their time to do these things that have to be done.
What are some of the responsibilities of the county board?
Well, of course, the county board is the governing body of the county. We are kind of a stepchild of the state legislature, and we're the only one in the county that can enact legislation. Our job is to furnish the tools to the other elected officials and appointed officials to run their offices, and we are the financial board for the county. We're responsible to make the budgets and appropriations and see that the money's appropriate to run all the offices and see that the money's spent properly. And in other words, just to sum it up, we're a governing board of the county.
What have some of your responsibilities been on the county board?
Well, we're broken down into committees. We're broken down into 3-man committees, and it's the prerogative of the chairman to appoint the committees. And I've served on most all the committees since I've been on the board. The one I've been on my whole career on the board has been the nursing home committee, and of course that's been one of my primary goals was to do something about that nursing home when I first went on the board. In fact, we was mandated to do something by the state of Illinois, and myself and some more of our board members got busy and really got something done about that situation, which, as you know, is our present nursing home, which we're very proud of. And I've served on about all the committees. Right now I'm serving on the Building and Grounds Committee and the Nursing Home Committee, and also the Legislative Committee for the board, which puts me in Springfield a lot, and some of the other committees that have to have members to help them out. I help those out too. But my main committees right now is Buildings and Grounds and Finance and Nursing Home and Legislative Committees, which takes a lot of my time.
What was the situation with the nursing home prior to this new one?
Well, of course, what we had was the old county farm, which was known as the old poor farm, and it was not meeting state standards. Not only through fire standards, but it was meeting the standards that we was supposed to have out there for even to take care of our patients. Because we was licensed only for one type of care, which we wasn't licensed for skilled care at all. And we had some people who walked in out there who eventually got sick and had to go to bed. And of course, when they did that, we was violating our license. And of course, the state wouldn't stand for that on so long. So there's a lot of difference between shelter care and intermediate care and skilled care, and all we had was a shelter care license.
How old was the old county nursing home?
Oh, I couldn't tell you exactly, but it was. If I remember, I heard some of the old board members talk about it. They bought that farm in the 20s, and put up the old nursing home, and sometime in the early 20s. I don't know exactly. I never researched it, but it was somewhere, I think, back in the 20s. And it was adequate for that time. But then as our people got older and they lived longer and had to have more care, it wasn't meeting standards at all, and we had a choice to make, either to lock it up and have none, or to do what we did, which was to join hands with the hospital and make the joint venture we have out there now. By the way, what's that venture out there now is the only one in the state of Illinois like it, where we have a joint venture between the hospital and the county with that nursing home.
What are some of your responsibilities on the legislative committee and being in Springfield?
Any legislation pertains to counties is what I work on, and I work closely with my House representatives and my senator, and also with my congressman in Washington. In fact, last Wednesday I was in some committee hearings. I attend the committee hearings pertaining to county government, bills pertaining to county government, and even sometimes I go to other hearings to help out some of the other office holders if they have a problem with a bill. We have, last week we had our convention, and at that time people come in from all over the state. All the office holders come in, and we have joint meetings, and then we have separate meetings. The clerks, the circuit clerks, the sheriffs, the county boards, coroners, everybody gets together, and we talk about our problems and try to improve legislation or defeat legislation, whichever is the best for the counties. So I do spend a lot of time working on legislation. My last venture 2 years ago, I had a House bill passed, House Bill 1040, which pertains to nursing homes. We don't have in this county a tax levy to support our nursing home because the size county we have, where the statute doesn't call for it. So I had Representative Sam Vincent pass the bill through the House, and Senator John Maitland passed it through the Senate. It come out with a referendum on it, which I didn't want it, and I was doing my best last week to get them to amend that bill to take that referendum off of it. But so far I haven't succeeded. But as we go to an expansion program, which we're going to have to do with the present nursing home, maybe we can convince the people of Piatt County that we need an expansion program, and if we can pass a referendum or however we do finance it, maybe I can then get that passed.
What are some of the highlights as you look back in your political career?
Well, of course, that's kind of hard to say. I guess the biggest thrill you get when you first start is to be elected. I mean, I think if you run for an office and are successful through the help of your friends and everything, I think that's the biggest thrill. It's your first time that you're elected to office, and of course you look forward to continuing. And I think it's a good thing for people to do that as long as their health is good and they like to do it. I think you have to like to do it. If you don't like to do what you're doing in politics, it would be quite dreary. But I think that's the biggest thrill is to being elected to the job and to feel that the people gives you that responsibility. And it is a responsibility, and I think you should take that very seriously.
What are some of the other organizations and churches you belong to in the Monticello area?
Well, of course, I've always belonged to the Methodist Church. I've never been as active in the church as I should have been because all my career in business, I work 7 days a week. And I was the one that opened up our place of business every morning, 7 days a week. I mean, early. And that's the only way you succeed in business is to be close to it. And I kind of neglected my duties, I guess, as going to church, although I've always supported my church and I've always belonged to the Methodist Church ever since I was baptized in the Methodist Church as a little one. And my family, my father and mother was somebody, they never missed a church service. And I kind of got away from it when I got busy.
I know you belong to Rotary. What other organizations?
Well, I still belong to Legion, of course. I haven't been active in the American Legion for a long time because I did my duty as an American Legion from the post commander right on down through all the committees. And I do help them when I can. The last time I helped them was last year when we had the memorial for the young boy in town who was the Medal of Honor winner. And I did help them set up that program and get their speakers for them. And I'm always glad to help them time I can, but to have the time to hold an office anymore, I don't have the time. In Rotary, of course, you're assigned a responsibility, and of course, naturally, they give me the senior citizens because I am connected with a nursing home, and I handle the committee through the Rotaries for the senior citizens.
To go back, when did your family, the Valentine family, come to the Monticello area?
Well, grandmother told me one time, and of course Aunt Catherine, she was the youngest of that family of 12. My mother was the oldest. Grandmother said, and so did Aunt Catherine, told me one time that they come from Pennsylvania in a wagon to Ohio to Indiana in different times of Indiana here, and my mother was born over here in a little room before the windows was even put in after they arrived here. And grandfather died a young man and left that big family. And my father comes from a family of 12, so they both come from big families. And
when did your father's family come here?
Well, they come in here about the same time. They was, of course, most of the people in this part of the country, they migrated, from the east eventually. Father, I just got a book a while back, and I haven't read all of it yet on the Bennett family, and it's quite interesting. Of course, most of us are English, a lot of English in us. And as Aunt Catherine told me one time when she was a kid me about raising trees, of course, that's my hobby, and she said, that's English in you because they like to garden. And I guess that's true because grandmother also had some English in her, too. But the Valentines, all of them were, as I used to say, they could raise corn in the middle of the road. They was that good at it. And Father was no slouch when it come to raising something himself, too. He was very good at it. So I kind of inherited a lot of that. That's, as I say, not only my hobby, sometimes it's worse than a hobby. It gets to be work.
Do you recall your first automobile?
Well, the one I first owned was that 28 Model A that I owned myself. I used to drive my father's stuff, of course, but the first car I owned was a Model A 28.
What president do you recall most vividly?
Well, I suppose that would be President Roosevelt that I would remember the most because of the things that he did and stood for at that time. Whether I agree with him or not, I won't make a comment on that, but I guess, and of course the second one you probably remember more than anybody else would be Truman and the things that he did and stood for during the Korean War and so forth. My favorite president yet today is Dwight Eisenhower. I think Dwight Eisenhower was a great president, and not only because he was a military man, but I think he had the right ideas to keep us out of trouble. And he's the president I admire the most was Dwight Eisenhower.
Well, I thank you very much, and I've enjoyed interviewing you.
Okay.